Did you know that it's advisable to import cars from Japan that are slightly above 100,000 kilometers in mileage? I've said this quite a number of times on my social media platforms, on Twitter, on TikTok, on Facebook, and on Instagram. And I've also highlighted the advantages of doing this. However, this is not always applicable to all cars. So today I want us to consider on the factors that you need to put into consideration when importing a car from Japan. So I write factors to consider when importing or on Japan importation. Let me just write that. And the reason as to why I'm specific to Japan is because they have a law, a mandatory rule that states that once a car surpasses 100,000 kilometers, there are specific things that they have to change. It's mandatory. Some things have to be changed. They do a very thorough inspection, and there are quite a number of components that need to be replaced. All right? So over here, I'll just list down those specific components. The first thing is the timing belt. After the timing belt, they also change the suspension components. Suspension components, I'm talking of the bushings, I'm talking of the struts, I'm talking of the shock absorbers, I'm talking of the coil springs, bushes, all that, all the suspension components. Something else they always check into and change is what we call the brakes. The brakes, I'm talking of the likes of the rotors, brake pads, the discs, the drums, everything. Basically, the braking system. Another thing they change is what we call the steering components. The steering components include the steering rack, the steering column, the rack ends, and everything that is encompassed in the steering system. Another thing they change is the alternator. We all know that the alternator is responsible for the charging of the electric components in the car. They also change the starter motor. The starter motor is part of the ignition system when starting the car. Another thing they change into, or they always replace, is the universal joints. So all these components, after a thorough research, after a thorough diagnosis, a thorough check into the car components, these are the items that they consider replacing. So if you buy a car that has already been replaced all these items, it simply means that the car will serve you longer because it has components that can take you for a really, really long time. So take a chance, you buy a car at 90,000 kilometers. At 90,000 kilometers, then I can assure you of one thing. If the timing belt, the suspension, and the brakes, if they are not yet out, they are on their way out. They are stepping out. So you buy the car, then after the first major service, that is at 10,000 kilometers, you realize that a car has a lot of issues. And by the way, this is something that I can attest of it in the garage. We've seen so many cars. Actually, when I talk to the clients, they're like, I've barely had this car for 2 months. Yet, the timing belt has an issue. The water pump has an issue. The alternator has an issue. It's simply because by the time they were buying the car, these issues had not yet really outshined. They had not really come out, but they were on their way to getting out. But now, if you go for a car that is now 102,000 kilometers, all these items have been changed. And if all these items have been changed, then it gives you more time as the car owner because you'll have ample time to enjoy the car before it starts demanding too much from you. Now, there are other cars that you need to go for a car that is 50,000 kilometers and below. Which cars are these? Today, I want to make a comparison between other cars versus number one, Subaru. Another car is hybrid. And when I talk about hybrid, I'm talking about the plug-in hybrid and the non-plug-in hybrid. It's the hybrid family. And also the EV cars. So I'm comparing other cars versus Subaru, hybrid, and EV. When you talk about the Subaru, the hybrid, and the EVs, these are the cars that you need to consider importing a car that is 50,000 kilometers and below. Why is that so? That is simply because these cars, when they hit 100,000 kilometer mileage, when you talk about the Subaru, it comes with what we call the CVT. So this one I'm not just categorical to the Subaru, but I'm talking about any car that comes with a CVT transmission. When you talk about the hybrid and the EV, the hybrid, I'm talking about the battery pack, the hybrid battery pack, and the EV, I'm talking about the electric battery pack. After they clock a mileage of 100,000 kilometers, these components are not replaced. So you realize that you just bought a car, maybe it's slightly above 100,000 kilometers, but then after a very short span, you've got all CVT issues. Understand one thing about CVT. Let me clear out this part so that at least I can ensure that everything can be seen. When you talk about CVT, the mechanism of operation is simple. A CVT operates on a belt and pulleys, okay? So over time, there is the normal wear and tear. Imagine in Kenya, we usually import cars that are 8 years and above. And when they're 8 years and above, then you can always tell that they've been on the road for quite some time. And then being on the road for quite some time, then it goes without saying that there has to be normal wear and tear that has occurred. So now you realize that you've bought the car, but then after a very short span, you already have CVT issues. I know there's one thing about CVT. It cannot be repaired. It has to be replaced. So a very short span, you're incurring a lot of cost because you have to buy a new gearbox. When you talk about the hybrid and the battery pack, the hybrid / the EV, I want to highlight on the battery pack. The lifespan of a battery pack is usually between 8 to 10 years. 8 to 10 years, the car that is coming into our country, and I'm specific to Kenya because we usually import cars that are 8 years. When it's coming to this country, it only gives you a guarantee of just 2 years. 2 years, then you will have to start having battery pack issues. And let me tell you something, going for a whole battery pack, it's hella expensive. Let me give an example of Outlander, plug-in Outlander. Going for the entire battery pack cost a whole 800,000. Because you're not in a position to afford going for a new battery pack, what you consider doing is replacing cell by cell. You replace 2 cells this time round, you cover another maybe 5,000 kilometers, another cells need replacement. So it becomes a very inconveniencing process because it is replacement after replacement after replacement after replacement, which is very expensive. Another thing is that you will not get to enjoy the feeling of driving a hybrid. The whole thing about getting a hybrid is to ensure that you have good fuel economy, and at the same time, it is meant to reduce your daily budget as a car owner. But now with the cells filling one after the other, then it keeps on digging deeper into your pocket. So when I talk about the Subaru, the hybrid and the EV, consider going for a car that is 50,000 kilometers and below. Understand one thing, they will not come cheap because the mileage is low. But what compensates for the higher buying price is the fact that it will give you a long time, because it gives you, if it wears out at 100,000 kilometers, you've got another 50,000 kilometers before your car starts demanding a lot of money from you. That way, you will have enjoyed quite some time with it, and also you have already prepared yourself mentally for the things that you need to replace. Right? Why am I doing this video? You might wonder. It's because I've seen quite a number of clients. They've come in, their car is relatively new. Some of them you are asking, when did you buy it? 3 months ago. 3 months ago, yet the car is demanding major repairs. Remember the parts outlined over here? This one is more like a major service has been done on that car. But now you've just bought the car, you've not even had enough time to be like, I'm enjoying this car. Then it's demanding a lot of money from you. So for those cars that don't have a CVT, for those cars that are not hybrids, may they be plug-in hybrids, may they be non-plug-in hybrids, and for the EV cars, any other car that is not in that category, consider going for a car that is 100,000 kilometers and above. And I mean slightly, all right? Maybe 102,000 kilometers, 105,000 kilometers. At least it gives you the assurance that a major restoration process has been done on that car. And when you look at the things I highlighted, they are the major components in the powertrain and also in the driving system, in the steering system, in the suspension system. So it's like the car is brand new. Yes, it's been longer on the road, but at least they've done what you call revamping. So now, what you should do is one thing. For any car that doesn't have this, go for one that is 100,000 kilometers, slightly above. But for the Subarus, the hybrid or the EV, and Subaru, I'm not just categorical, I mean any car that comes with CVT transmission, go for 50,000 kilometers and below. So I hope you've learned something new. And for more car tips on such topics and even other diverse topics, kindly consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, and I'll highly appreciate it for real.